Hi, I'm Rob,
And I'm Rob,
and welcome to the Help Me I'm Middle-Aged podcast.
where you can find fun, exciting things about being middle-aged.
Oh, you're going to find things about us and about yourself you never thought you knew.
Hold on, come along for the ride. It's going to be fun.
Welcome to the Help Me I'm Middle-Aged podcast. My name is Rob.
And I'm Rob too.
Today, our guest is Anthony Cozzi. He is a local to our town here in New Jersey. He is a deacon at our local church, and we thought it would be a great story if he could tell his journey about becoming a deacon in the middle-aged part of his life, because that's the subject matter of the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Anthony.
Hey, thank you. Happy to be here.
That's great
Glad to be with you guys. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thanks for coming out again. But our basis of the podcast was to sort of dig into this journey through life, like where you're from, how you got here, your influences, and what drove you to this down this journey and becoming a deacon, because it's a little bit of a sacrifice, and you have a family, and we thought it'd be a great story for the audience to hear. Rob?
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of people who are watching this may not be Catholic, but if you are of a different denomination or a different religion, there's probably the equivalent of a deacon in a lot of different types of religions. So this is, to me, it's kind of interesting as a person who is in their middle-aged time of life. What are some of the things that, like, as Rob mentioned, kind of sparked the desire to proceed down here? Because I think we all face, we raise kids and we get to a certain part of life where you start to say, okay, what's next? So I look at this not really as a specific denominational focus, but as a person kind of saying, where do I go with my life? And how can I improve upon it? And how can I influence people and help the community? So I'm very excited to hear, what kind of sparked this for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little different for everybody. I mean, it is a calling.
Mhm.
And so for everybody, it's a little different. For me, you were saying, where do I come from? I grew up the early part of my life in Bay Ridge, New York. Moved out as a teen into the kind of the shore area, Middletown, New Jersey. Grew up, went to college at Marist College. It's Poughkeepsie, New York. Met my wife. Well, at the time she was, just my girlfriend. Became my fiance and married her. Met her at Marist. Right now, I'm a 54-year-old father of three boys, ages 24 through 15,
Mhm.
and married for 29 years to that woman I met at Marist, a lovely woman.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I work as a technology manager, a product manager for a tech company. I've coached youth sports for about 18 years, at baseball and football primarily, and was past Grand Knight in the Knights of Columbus and district deputy of the former district deputy in the Knights of Columbus. And now I'm a deacon in a Catholic church. As you can tell, I'm kind of a type A personality. I kind of keep myself busy. But my journey to become a deacon was kind of, let's say it was coincidental. I wasn't, it isn't something like, well, I was looking for something to do and I became a deacon.
Right.
It really is something where I had heard the call for a while. I feel that God has blessed my family and I with quite a lot, and I wanted to give back a little bit. I wanted to kind of be in service to God and His church. And there was a call maybe 5 or 6 years before I was actually thinking about it. I kind of heard about it. I knew about it. Our parish has been blessed to have an abundance of deacons. I think it's important where you can see a deacon to understand what they do, to get a sense of who they are. I think that cultivates the call to be a deacon. But I had been thinking about it for a while. Hadn't really told anybody about it. Had just been thinking about it. And this woman came up to me one day and she said, listen, I had a dream last night. Mary has something important for you to do. She says it's important and you really should go through with it. Now, I hadn't told even my wife at that point. And I'm kind of thinking like, is that what she's talking about? I wasn't quite sure. And I was in the Knights of Columbus, as I said, and this is maybe about a month later. I'm giving a presentation, and somebody said, as you were talking, I kind of got this image of Mary over your right shoulder, and she was smiling at you, and not sure what that means, but that was, that was the image I got in my head. And I said to myself, okay, that's a little coincidental, that's a little strange.
Do you know these people? Did you know them, or?
One I knew pretty well. One's a parishioner at our church, the one who had the dream. The other one I didn't really know before. It was just somebody who had come. We were starting a new Knights of Columbus chapter over at the local parish next door, and he happened to be there. And he's sort of known in his parish for having these visions. So it was a little odd, little disconcerting. I don't know the right word. And then maybe it was 2 or 3 months after that, I was at another Knights of Columbus function, and we had a ceremony that was at the church, and I'm sitting next to the pastor, and he says, "You look pretty good." And I thought he was talking about what I was wearing. I'm like, "Hey, thanks," And he goes, "No, the seat you're in, it's a good seat. You ought to think about making it a permanent thing." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're sitting in the deacon's chair. You ought to think about it." And now, again, this is now 3 or 4 months. I haven't even told my wife. I haven't told anybody, but I've had 3 people now sort of say there was a plan for me. And so now I'm starting to get, quite frankly, I was getting a little unnerved about it. And so I think it was maybe a few months after that I had a friend who was a priest over the house. And what had been going on is I'm praying all this time, saying, God, why do you want me? I'm just a middle-aged guy. I've got my family, I've got all these other things going on. Why do you want me? And I asked this specific prayer one week, and this priest friend happened to be over. I said, my prayer at the time was, Lord, I don't think I'm worthy for this. I'm not, of all the people you could pick, why are you picking me? And at this dinner, hadn't even told this priest, hadn't told my wife yet. He says, it's funny, when I was in the seminary, I had a conversation with my rector, and I said, I'm really not sure I'm worthy to become worthy to become a priest. And his comment, the rector's comment back to him was, well, none of us are, but God makes us worthy. And now I'm going, well, here's like somebody talking exactly in answer to a prayer I prayed like maybe 3 or 4 days ago. Make a long story short, a little less short. I've gone through, and there was a number of these different sort of coincidences that had gone on. And, that prayer and answer thing happened several times. My prayer changed, and I got an answer within a certain amount of time. So I went to see the local pastor, and I asked him, I said, listen, these coincidences have happened. Like, what do you think? And his comment to me was, well, I don't know that that the Lord is calling you to become a deacon, but he's definitely calling you somewhere. And if you follow it, you'll find out what it is. And so now I'm saying to myself, do I go through with this? Do I not go through with this? Because it is a commitment. And then I said to myself, if I don't go through with this, I'm saying no. I'm saying no to God. But if I do go through with it and he doesn't want me to become a deacon, don't worry. He'll take care of that, So rather than me say no to God, I'd rather say the yes and have him tell me no. And that's sort of what started the whole journey. It was, nobody, I kept asking, what's a calling? What's a calling feel like? And I never really got an answer. And the reason why is that calling is different for everybody. It's a little different. It's basically knowing that there's something more that you should be doing, a slight pull, a tug to something different, and then having the courage to live that out.
Was there anything, like, without getting too personal, like very negative in your life, that there was a void that you needed to fill with something?
It really wasn't a void. It wasn't like, well, okay, like I'm middle-aged, some things in my life are going away, so I need something to fill it. It wasn't that. It is filling your life with something else, but it's one of those mysteries of faith kind of thing. It's a cup that's full, but still can be filled more. It's one of those,
Yeah. And you're still working during this whole time too, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things about that. We talk about deacons before we go much further. There are 2 types of deacons, right? There's the transitional deacons. So in the journey to priesthood in the Catholic Church, one of the steps is to become a deacon.
Right.
Okay. But what I live is what's called the permanent diaconate. There is no progression into becoming a priest for me. So in the permanent diaconate, yeah, you got your job, you got your family, you've got your kids, you got the church. So there's a lot going on.
Okay, so what do they typically require if a person wants to become a deacon? Like time commitment, education, all those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
this is this is like, you're at this point when you make that decision, you're all in.
well, yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, so, all right, there's two questions in there. So what are the requirements? The requirements are you have to be 35 years old, at least 35 years old. You have
Like
to
the
be
president, I guess.
kind of, yeah, yeah, exactly. You have to be male. You have to be in the Catholic Church for at least 5 years. So like if you were baptized as an adult, you have to be in the Catholic Church for 5 years. You have to be practicing. You need to get a recommendation from your pastor. If you're married, you have to be in a stable marriage. They tend to want about 10 years of stable marriage. Those are the kind of the basic requirements from an educational standpoint. They want generally they want you to have a high school graduate or a GED. But those are the basic requirements.
Right.
But being all in, then you start a program, and the first step is get recommended by your pastor. Then there's a year of discernment, and that's sort of where you sort of discern if this is right for you. You and your wife go through some training session, not training sessions, but educational sessions where they tell you a little bit about what to expect and what it's like and what's the life like. Um, you go through a period of light study. They give you some books to read. They do a psychological exam on you. You got to get paperwork together. So in that 1 year, you got that year to kind of look at it and say, am I interested or am I not interested? And the church is looking at you and going, okay, do you fit the criteria at the same time? Then you go through 4 years of education. It's that 4 years of education where you're sort of all in, because now you're actually doing study. The cost of the study, I mean, it's a little different from diocese to diocese, but our diocese works in conjunction with Seton Hall. So my study was basically, I have a master's in theology from Seton Hall. That's kind of the core curriculum you go through.
Mhm.
That cost of that is covered 1/3 by the family, 1/3 by the parish, and 1/3 by the diocese. So, you got a little skin in the game at that point by the time you start education, because you're paying at least part of the
Yeah.
education.
Well,
No, no,
I don't think it's a financial thing. It's more of a
time
it's a time commitment between you, your
Oh,
family. In the pre-interview, you said this was a family decision too.
oh, it's got to be. It's got to
Right.
be.
All right.
My wife has made a lot of sacrifices because of the time commitment that I have in the church. Um, you know, one of my fears, and my wife has to live this too. One of my fears is, I went from being a regular guy to being a representative of the church. You're looked at a little differently. You know,
Yeah.
you get cut off in traffic today, before the diaconate, and you use a few choice words. The worst is someone's going to say is, "Oh, there goes Anthony Cozzi over there." Now you say a few choice words and you're going, "Oh, there's the deacon at the local parish." Ah, I get it. So you live life a little differently. You really do, even separate from everything else. But my kids have to put up with the fact that their dad's a deacon, and they hear me preach around the house all the time. Now they got to hear me on Sundays as well.
right.
Uh, my wife's got to realize that there's times that I'm going to be away, counseling counseling couples or baptisms, or there's going to be family occasions that I may have to miss because the scheduling just doesn't work out. So
Does she have to do anything as a wife?
she doesn't. Well, I mean, she's got to do a lot of stuff. She's got to pick up the slack for me around the house. I mean, she's got a lot to do.
That's a given, though, I guess, for
Yeah,
all of us. So.
yeah, but during the training, she did have to go to some sessions. During the 4 years of study, they had these women's study groups as well, which kind of I think it was a good thing. It allowed the wives to kind of share stories and to talk about what it's like.
Right.
Because they had deacons' wives coming and doing this. They also had a bit of women's spirituality, so it helped deepen their faith a little bit more. Um, but from a requirement of the church for my wife to do anything now, no, it's just, it's living a different life. It's living a life where, you know, her husband is doing something else, and she's been very gracious. I mean, the one thing I'll say is a deacon can't do this without the support of their family. They need to have their family supporting them. It's got to be a family decision.
Anthony, question for you. So when you go counsel people, when you talk to people and they open their heart out about their problems and what's going on in their lives, right? The, you know, it can be like emotional, right? And then you have to sort of hear this either tragic story or personal problem, and then like you walk back in the door to your house and you have to sort of like shut that off. But that, how do you separate that emotion that you just heard? Because like I'm a very emotional guy, like I would be with me for days, you know what I mean? So is that something they teach you, or you've learned to turn it off when you walk back in the door because you need to be present in your family's household?
Yeah, you know, that is a struggle. I'm one that I tend not to completely compartmentalize things, because I kind of feel if you bottle it up long enough, it's going to. It does take some time to process. They do, and it's part of the education. They do some pastoral care, so they kind of do some situations like, you know, how would you handle this, and they talk through how to have pastorally care for people. But I think some of it is the makeup of the person that's looking to become a deacon. I think if you're willing to put yourself out there, you already have a little bit of that characteristic to kind of, you know, open your heart out to people.
Okay.
Um, you know, it's something we all have to deal with, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was
it can be
there.
tough.
Was there anybody along this path, you know, that was either like a mentor, or was there anybody who kind of advised you not to go down this path? I mean,
Well, I mean, nobody advised me not to go down the path.
yeah,
Okay. But I will say that, you know, anybody that knows a little bit about being a deacon will say, don't go down this path without thinking it through.
right.
Don't go down this path without doing discernment and due diligence. It's not something to be taken lightly. I'm sort of blessed. I had, even before all of this, I had some friends that were priests, so they could kind of help me along the path. You know, there was a you know, particular priest that used to serve at our parish that I'm very good friends with, and he was very key and instrumental in being a sounding board for me during my time uh, in the study, as well as just being there to be a good friend and supportive. And that's huge. You know, that was big for me.
Okay. And I guess another question I have is that, you know, as you're going down this path, you're going to become a deacon. What can a deacon do that a priest, or, you know, what can a priest do that a deacon can't do? And, you know, are you mini priest type of
No,
thing? Or
no, you know, I'm glad you used that word, because I want to make that clear. You know, a deacon is not a mini priest. Okay. They are two completely separate roles. And anybody that says, you know, that a deacon is a mini priest doesn't really understand it.
Mhm.
Priests are imaged in, you know, are supposed to be imaged in Christ, the priest, you know, priest, prophet, and king. So they are there. They serve in persona Christi when it comes to things like the mass, when it comes to things like the confession. All right. Our image is Christ the servant. We're here to serve. And so really our role is around serving the local community. If you go back and you look at the first deacons, you'll see them in the Acts, the book, the Acts of the Apostles. The apostles needed to go preach, they needed to evangelize, they needed to do the religious services, and yet the people that followed them needed people to help make sure that wealth was being distributed equally, that there weren't arguments and fights. They needed people to make sure that widows were getting food, because some of the widows, because they weren't originally Jews, weren't getting food.
Mm.
So to handle those administrative functions, to handle the charity aspect of things, to handle the servant type aspect, 7 men in the Acts of the Apostles were ordained to serve as the first deacons. It's sort of the same thing now. So, you know, our main things are to serve, you know, assist the priest at mass, Things that we can do, sacraments we can do, we can perform baptisms, we can perform funerals, we can do wake services, we can be witnesses at marriages. One of the main things that priests do that deacons do not. Priests are ordained and can consecrate the Blessed Sacrament. So, we can't we can't be at mass and consecrate communion for anybody. So if we have a wedding that's got a mass, you need a priest. We can be the witness to that. So if you're doing just a wedding ceremony, not a mass, we can do that. Only priests can hear confessions. Deacons cannot. I joke with people. I said, I can hear your confession, just can't do much about the sin. But, I mean, it is a very different role. We're really here to bring the needs of the people to the priest and the pastor. We're to sort of be that feet on the street a little bit too. We have jobs, so we do our work in the workplace as well. We do our work in our families. So, we have a different sort of reach than the priest has. That's one of the advantages of the diaconate.
I got a question for you about the homily. So sometimes the deacon will do the homily.
Yeah.
So for your average Catholic, I guess, some homilies hit home to an individual and others don't, right? And based on the week, right? So when I walk out of church, I'm like, wow, that homily was that hit home, right? How much time? It seems like, I mean, you're up there talking for a while. Is it like all week? You're like you're
Some of us, it seems like we're talking for longer than others.
That's good. That's fine. But is it like how long does it take you to come up with that homily? It's almost like a mini book every week. It's like how long does it take you to figure it out? Right? Is it something that you're thinking about all week long?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, probably a couple of weeks now. Deacons, in a way, have an advantage over priests. I mean, priests preach every single day. It depends from parish to parish.
Right.
Oftentimes deacons might preach once a quarter. Our parish,
Okay.
we're blessed to preach once a month. Our pastor is very supportive of the deacons preaching. So oftentimes it'll be like, I'll be thinking about it a couple of weeks in advance, just to get an idea out. The average homily, they say, should be between 7 to 10 minutes, somewhere in that range. I know a priest who used to tell the mothers to hold their kids because as he would look at them, and as soon as the baby started to fuss, he'd end his homily wherever he was. Okay. But I would say, on average, for a Sunday homily, 8 to 10 hours I spend on it. Not necessarily all in one sitting, but I'll spend 8 to 10 hours on it. And I will tell you two little anecdotes. One is, there's been quite a number of times that I've spent about 7 or 8 hours on it, and maybe a couple of hours before the mass, I've said, oh, this is garbage, I gotta just get rid of this thing. and so now, but that's when the Holy Spirit really flows through you. Now it's not you, it's the Holy Spirit kind of flowing through you. And that is important. My process is to pray before I actually start writing. The other story I'll tell you about, homilies is, very often the homilies that I go away going, this is not my best work. I'm just not feeling this. I mean, I spent the time, but I hope somebody gets something out of this. That's usually the one, ironically, where people come up to me and go, man, that was incredible. It's like you knew what I needed to hear. You said just exactly what I needed to hear. I really appreciate it, man. That really hit home. And I go, man, that's the one I didn't like. So you never really know.
Yeah.
I write it based upon what I think I need and what I think other people need. I try and write my homilies in a way that I'll say feed people. So, I had a teacher who would say the important part of the homily is the so what. You could say, well, Jesus rose from the dead. So what? What's that mean to me? Unless I can make something out of it, unless I can use it in my life, what does that really mean? Those are just words, unless I know how to put that into practice in my life. And so my struggle, not my struggle, my work is to try and get the so what. How do you make this practical in people's lives? And I think if you do that, you're more apt to have those homilies that hit home, because people can kind of see, what's this mean to me? What's this mean to my family? What do I have to do? How do I live my life differently?
Well, I think that, like I was telling you before, like I've gone through, I'm 51 years old, right? I'm approaching middle age soon, I think. But so, and throughout the course of my life, if those of us remember the old radios, we used to have to tune it in by your hand, right, in the car. And like that's how I feel sometimes I am with religion. Like sometimes I'm locked in, and other times like I feel like I fade, and other times I'm locked in. So when you're speaking to the congregation or you're having one-on-ones, do you get that with some people where you try and like bring them back in or just have a conversation?
Look, I think that our faith ebbs and flows a little bit. I mean, that's no different. Like think about it like in terms of your marriage. I mean, there are some days that marriage is real easy. There's some days that marriage isn't as easy. You ebb and flow, but you're committed to that marriage. So you
Right.
don't go away, and you try and find your way back. I think faith is the same thing, is that we ebb and flow, but our commitment to our faith is what's important. That even though we may be in a bit of a dry period, we're looking forward to that way back. We're looking for that way back. And, hopefully that's part of what I hope to do. Why did I become a deacon? What really motivates me to become a deacon? It's if I can find that way to help people to understand their faith better, bring them closer to their faith. Um, I think that one of the questions that I'm going to be asked, at the pearly gates is going to be, how many people did you lead back to Christ? And, you know, hopefully I've got a good answer for that.
I think it's going to be a lot because
Yeah,
I've
you're a
I've
good
seen, yeah,
example, if nothing else. So for sure.
absolutely,
Well,
absolutely.
that's the other thing, being, getting to the middle age portion of it, there's an advantage that there is we talked a little bit about the sacrifice that the family has to make, but there's also a benefit there. I'm a firm believer that it's important for men to experience their spirituality and be leaders in their house, along with their wives, but men have to be strong in their faith, especially if they have sons. There was a study done that if a father goes to mass, well, if a father doesn't go to mass, in general, the odds, whether or not the wife goes or doesn't go, the odds that the child is going to continue to go to mass is under 5% if
Wow.
the father doesn't go. If the father goes, that number jumps to like 40 and 50%, because for whatever reason, kids seem to take their cue from the male. And yet I think it's very common in a lot of Christianity, especially the Catholic Church, for men to sit back and go, well, that's my wife's job. She'll make sure she goes to, the kids will go to CCD. They make sure they go to church. So it really, if you want your kids to stay close to the faith, I think it's important as a man to kind of live that faith out. So I see this not only as something that I want to do to serve, but maybe something I can be an example to my three boys for on
Mhm.
how to stay close to the church and how important faith is.
Interesting. As far as you said married becoming a deacon. If you're single, becoming a deacon, I've read, and whether or not this is situational between different parishes. Can you get married then, or do you have to remain single?
No, there's a sort of special celibacy that deacons have. So if you're married before you're ordained,
Right.
the church, welcomes the sanctity of marriage, and you're to live that out. If your wife were to pass, you then become celibate. So, I have promised that if my wife passes away, I will not remarry. I will then remain celibate. Um, and it's kind of funny because the permanent deacons all take that. I'm sorry, the transitional deacons all take that promise, okay, and they often have the ceremony together. And so they have to be very careful at the ordination to make sure they know who are the transitional deacons, who are the permanent deacons, and who are the unmarried permanent deacons, because they don't want the wrong people stepping forward to take that oath without even realizing. Because trust me, sort of like a wedding day, an ordination day, your mind's a bit of a blur. You're
Right.
kind of just kind of moving along, and you don't want the wrong guy making a promise to celibacy when he's married at ordination time. So,
Right.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I
So
guess
I,
if you go ahead, Rob.
I got a question for you. So when you do, you've done funerals before, correct?
yes.
When you don't know the person, I always find this an amazing talent. Like, they weren't religious. They were Catholic, baptized. The family wants a mass with is it tough to like say a few words about the deceased and not like know them, like have a connection with them?
Well,
'Cause some priests do it great. I don't know if they recycle a lot of lines or not, but other ones are like, I imagine it's got to be tough.
well, it isn't. It isn't, because I think if you're giving good pastoral care, you may not have known the family before the person has passed on,
Right.
but you've gotten to know them in the last few days, because there is a pastoral uh, care in just being there, just being available.
Right.
And so, normally a priest or a deacon would have been to the wake service for that funeral, would have gotten to meet the family maybe a little bit and learned a little bit and talked a little bit about them. You might have been there if the person was sick or ill. A priest may have been there and giving them last rites, the anointing of the sick. So there are opportunities to kind of get to meet the family. Now, that isn't possible all the time, but I think in those moments, you kind of try to learn a little bit about the person. And then there's just some even if you don't have personal details about the person, you can speak to the hope, the hope in heaven, and the importance of the fact that this person is loved by God, and God wants all of us to be with him in heaven. And so there is always the hope that this that the with him in heaven, and clearly life is not the end of everything.
Right. Right. Right.
So I think, if you don't know the person, you kind of focus on that aspect of God's love and the hope of heaven.
So, on one sense, what would you say? Was there any challenges in being a deacon, and the verse, the joy of it?
Well, you know, clearly, I don't think if the joy didn't outweigh any sacrifice, I think it would be harder for the number of deacons to exist. I mean, right now there's 142 deacons in our diocese, about 32, and then an additional 32 that are retired. So, I think that if you speak to most deacons, they're going to tell you that the joy and the benefits outweigh any sacrifices, hands down. Just simply knowing that you've given somebody some peace of mind, that you've helped them on their journey to get married, that you've welcomed their child into the Catholic faith. I mean, what joy is that? And I stand right next to the priest when a miracle happens every Sunday at Mass. How many people can
Right.
say that? You know what I mean?
Sure.
I
Yeah.
watch a miracle at least once every Sunday happen right on the altar, and I'm right there, next to the priest when it's happening. So,
It's not
you
a
know,
bad Sunday morning.
no, it's not a bad Sunday morning. It really isn't. And, but there are benefits to my family too, I can see that my kids are closer to the faith. I bring some of those books home from my studies, and my kids are reading them. I mean, these are not light material. This is not light reading material.
Right.
I've got my oldest son is reading St. Thomas Aquinas. You don't necessarily just pick that up and go, I need something to read when I'm, heading into the bathroom or something like that. I mean, this is like serious stuff, but they're picking this stuff up and they're really reading it, and it does change your dinner conversations a little bit. I got to say that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome. That's awesome. Rob?
Hey, another quick question I had, who's your boss?
Yeah,
As
my
a
boss.
deacon?
That's a bit
I know
of a-
your wife. I mean, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
well, that's right. That
there.
is number one. Absolutely. That is number one.
That's the chairman of the board.
That's right. Exactly. Well, so there is a practical answer and there's a technical answer. So technically, deacons are ordained to serve the bishop. Okay. But practically, the bishop then assigns that deacon to serve a parish, and by definition, a pastor. So yes, my pastor is my boss. There is an unwritten number one rule above everything else in the diaconate. Number one rule is the pastor is always right.
Okay.
Just like home.
Yes, kind of.
And can they send you to a different parish, or do you have a say, or?
That's another one that's got the technical answer and the sort of the practical answer. The
Right.
technical answer is, yeah, we're at the bishop's, we like a priest, we promise obedience to the bishop, and the bishop could move us, and it's at wherever the need is.
Right.
I was blessed. We had already had 4 deacons, which is a lot for a parish, and yet they assigned me to my home parish. That doesn't normally happen. Sometimes you'll have to go to a parish that isn't where you grew up or you're currently going. But they tend not to move deacons around like they do priests. Like, so priests every 3 to 5 years, they try and rotate priests. Deacons, not that way in practice, because they recognize that the whole family's going to that parish. It's a little invasive to uproot the whole family out of a parish and move them to another one. So in theory, yes, they could move me around. In practice, they tend not to. But if a need arises big enough, they might.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess you got to go where the need is.
That's exactly right.
And did they, you mentioned before a few deacons retired. What's the parameters around leaving being a deacon through a retirement type situation?
Yeah, well, there's not a universal rule across all dioceses. Most dioceses at age of 75. And then if you want, you can apply at age 75 for an extension if you still want to continue. And that extension is granted year by year. So every year, the bishop would approve the extension.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I guess after, you start to get up there, the age functions of things, and they just want to make sure everything is still consistent. Is there like a continuing education situation you have to do?
Yeah, that is true. They do very often have workshops, and now COVID, this has sort of changed a little bit, but there is a retreat. Deacons have to go on a 4 or 5 day retreat every year. So there always is a continuing education in that respect. It's also true that faculties, certain faculties may or may not. You talk about, the ability, the mental acuity kind of thing. Deacons they're not guaranteed the faculty to preach. So, if their mental acuity was a little off or something like that, they could suspend, let's say, the faculty to preach if they wanted to, and still keep the deacon as functioning, as an assistant at mass and other things.
Right.
So they could adjust those faculties, and you could still remain a deacon. But what some of these, I can't really speak to the 32. I don't know the 32 men personally, but if let's say I was going to retire, I was going to move down to South Carolina. My privileges to become a deacon are only in this diocese. So if I move down to South Carolina, yeah, kind of. So I would if I were to move down to South Carolina, I'd have to get to continue to become a deacon. I need two things. I need the bishop where I was coming from to write a letter saying that I have the ability to continue to become a deacon, that I left in good standing here. And I need the approval of the Bishop of South Carolina, whatever parish in South Carolina that diocese they have down there. They'd have to approve it. This is for a couple of reasons. This is one, to make sure, if they have too many deacons, they're not just going to throw another one on necessarily. So it's based upon need a little bit. And it's also to make sure that, someone isn't just leaving one place to go to another because they're trying to leave some bad situation behind. That's why they need the bishop to say they left in good standing.
Right.
Anthony, I have a question. So when people need counseling, or they want to reach out, do they reach out to you personally, or do they reach out to the rectory, and then that person's given to you to sort of reach out and have a conversation with? How does that work?
It's you know, it is a mix. I would say most people go through the parish office, and that's what they really should do, go through the
Right,
parish office. But you know, sometimes you get people that know you personally, and so they
right.
just, you know, they feel comfortable talking to you, and they may ask. At which point, I'll just let the office know that, hey, look, we've had somebody that's requested X, Y, Z. They want me to talk to them about something, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to pick it up. And you know, we share the load. That, you know, again, we've got 5 deacons, and soon I understand to be 6 in our parish. So I think that, you know, we share that load. So it's important that we all let everybody know what we're doing and communicate.
And that connection then, like that stays with you. Like if that person's having a rough time, and you sort of through counsel get them over the hump, and like that must be like an interesting. You'll always have that connection with that person, that you were there in their time of need.
Yeah. And you know what? That's where you get some of that payback, if you know what I mean, that you know that you were there
Yeah,
during a time of need, and you know, hey, look, you know, they're coming through on the other side, and I
right,
had something to do with that, and you can feel good. You know, you know, that's where you get, to me, that's the ultimate pride.
right. That's the joy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's that energy you get back to you. You know,
Yeah.
that's awesome. It's got to be, not all of us have the ability to, help someone out like that. That's a special gift.
Well, you know, we all have the ability to help somebody at some level. We all have gifts, and it's just
That's true.
it's just a matter of trying to find what your gift is and how to give that back.
No, that's absolutely, you're right about that. You're totally right about that.
Do you have like any like 5 years in the future goals for being a deacon, or is there any sort of like larger aspect of this that you'd like to see happen, or is it just do it
No.
and just keep doing it and affecting lives in a positive way? And
Yeah, that's for me, that's it. I mean, you know, there to be, you know, the only other kind of aspect, I mean, I could help the diocese in some bigger way, you know, we have a deacon that's at our church that's serving as the head of the deacons for the Diocese of Metuchen. So you can kind of go into that aspect of things. For me, that's not really something I'm interested in doing.
right.
I did this to help the person sitting next to me. And so I'm just happy. I'm happy where I am. I don't know that I'd want to change a thing.
Yeah. No, that's good.
And,
Yeah,
in our interview, you were talking about your pre-interview. You were talking about your mom had a really strong faith.
Oh yeah, my
Do
mother.
you?
Yeah, look, I grew up in an Italian household. Does that surprise you at all? But you know, my
That's
mother was always the one who, yeah, my father was, I don't want to give the wrong impression. My father had faith as well, but you knew that you were getting in that car on Sunday morning because you weren't going to tell mom, I don't feel like going, or, you know, that argument just had no legs.
right, right,
Um,
right.
and my mother was very, very faithful. So I did get that from her, but I'll say my father was right there at mass, and you know, he was an example as well. So um I grew up lucky like that, you know. I know in the pre-interview you had asked me, you know, was there a time I wasn't as close to the faith? And you know, I think I told you, ironically, it was when I went to a Catholic college called Marist College, and there was a chapel right in the center of campus. That's when, you know, you're a college kid, you got too much other things to do, and you think you're invincible, and
yeah.
who
You know
needs
it
all this
all.
other stuff? You know it all, right?
Sure.
And you know, although I grew up as an altar boy, I grew up with that strong faith. Yeah, it was college where I kind of fell away from it, and you know, I needed to come back to that. But it was my mother's example, it was my father's example, it was the fact that my household was ingrained in this, you know, to kind of do a very, you know, I'm a child of the 80s, to do a very bad Karate Kid you know, reference. He talks about the strong roots of the tree, you know, and when Daniel San is broken,
Right.
he's got those strong roots he can go back to. Well, it's that same sort of strong roots thing that I had with my family that's important. So, you know, I would say to couples that are considering having kids, or have young kids, the faith you give them now, that's going to be those strong roots back later. And so
Yeah,
if you want to keep them close to the faith, show them by example, you know.
yeah, that's good. Well,
I love the fact that you said that, like, your kids reading the books that you're reading, and like when I first came into it, I was like, wow, this is a big sacrifice to the family. And you were like, yes and no. And I had no idea that, like, your example of going through this journey basically brought the whole family closer to the church.
It
And I
did.
thought that was an amazing story.
Yeah, I mean, it really did. That's one of the big benefits. I think that, again, there's some times where my kids get tired of hearing me preach. But I think by the same token, as you said, my family's reading these same books that I'm reading. The conversation in our household has changed. It's, we talk about our faith a lot more. My kids aren't afraid or uncomfortable to pray as a family. That's something that not too many families do anymore, but they kind of know that's, we're a family, and we're a family that under God, we're a family that follows Jesus Christ. And so, it has affected our family in such a positive way. And that's another benefit.
Yeah, yeah. From outside looking in, I wasn't thinking that. And then when you brought that to my attention, I was like, wow,
Look,
that's huge.
I have a 15-year-old son who's still an altar server, and he's not ashamed to do it.
Right.
My 24-year-old was serving at 19, 20 years old, and happy to do it. These are boys where, look, I'm blessed. I had my oldest son tell me once when we were leaving church, he says, Dad, it takes us so long to leave church because you say goodbye to people. So many people here. I said, yeah, is that really a bad thing? He goes, no, but we're here for Mass. We're here for the Knights of Columbus. They were in the Squires. They got all these things going on. He goes, we're here like a lot of nights during the week. I said, is that a bad thing? And he looks at me and he says, no, you know what? This place feels like home.
that's cool.
To
That's
have
great.
your kid tell you that church feels like home, not just a place you go to for an hour a week, but a place that feels like a community, the home where he belongs. That's, again, another great benefit.
Yeah, in today's
That's awesome.
society, that's huge. I mean, to have that
That's
other connection,
yeah,
outside just the family, that's very
Yeah.
important.
yeah. That's great. It's great that if he feels at home in the church, doesn't feel. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Hey, how about now? So it's 2021 now. You started this whole journey what year?
Let's see, I was ordained the class of 2019. That would have meant I started this journey. Well, if you talk about actually entering the program, probably around 2015. I was probably thinking about it in 2013.
Wow.
All right. And did COVID blindside you as you got ordained?
Who didn't it blindside? Who knew COVID was coming?
For this purpose.
Well, I mean, look, I got to be honest with you. I did not think the churches were going to be shut down.
Yeah.
I looked at that as like an essential, essential service. Yeah,
Right.
essential service. So I really didn't know that it was going to get shut down. And then it got shut down, if you remember, like weeks before Palm Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Like during the highest holy time of the year. So
And that was your first Palm Sunday?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I had one before that.
Gotcha.
I think, right? 2020. Yes. No, it would have been my first Palm Sunday. I think you're right.
Okay.
Wow.
So you didn't get a chance to, as you're newly deaconized,
Yes,
to apply your talents, I guess.
I guess, right. Let me think about this. 2020, 2019. Yeah, it would have been because I was ordained in May of 2019 and 2020. Yeah. Wow, I didn't really realize that. Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, I guess you're right. It was not, yeah, wow.
So you put all this work in, and then all of a sudden what are you doing? I mean,
well, yeah, well, that was the most interesting thing. What was I doing? Probably the same thing everybody else was doing, watching Mass via live stream.
Right.
I got to, you just couldn't, you couldn't go to Mass anymore. It's just kind of an odd thing. So
has the numbers of people, like, have they stayed away? Like, is the church, because
Well,
I was there at 12 o'clock mass the other day, and like, my mind starts going. I was like, okay, well, were there this many people here before COVID? So have some people not felt comfortable coming back, or have they just broken the habit? Like, what's the attendance ratio?
well, I don't, I can't give you any official numbers because I'm really not privy to
Yeah,
all the official numbers, but I'll tell you
you
my
get a
my feeling.
feeling, right?
Yeah, my
Right,
feeling. It's tough to say right now. I'll say it's tough to say because it's summer, right?
Yeah.
And
right,
unfortunately, I hate to say it, we need to go to mass even during the summer, and we need to go to mass even when we're on vacation. But I will tell you that mass attendance drops off in the summer. So it's kind of tough to say right now. But I will say I'm very pleased with the number that's come back. I do see a much bigger number that's in the parish right now.
right.
I think we'll know a little bit more in probably the next 3 or 4 weeks as school starts up and people are out of going to the beach and going down to the shore.
Right.
But I will tell you the numbers are up, and
Good,
I will
good,
tell you
good.
that but I will also tell you there are still some people that are afraid and are staying home for safety precautions. I think there's some that really should. I mean, if they're in a high risk group,
Yeah,
I get it.
right.
But the obligation is back. So, if we're not in a critical situation, we're not sick, or we're not extremely vulnerable, we should be at mass.
One of the funniest things I ever heard a priest say was Easter Sunday. It's like Jack, the place you can't move. He says, "We're here all year, folks."
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be here
And
all.
Yeah, we're
no,
here all year.
I mean, that is, that is an important thing. I mean, like, God wants us there every Sunday. So, I say, I say to my kids, if somebody gave you $168 at the beginning of every week, right? And at the end of the week said, listen, can you give me $1 back? Would you tell them no? If they gave you $168 in the beginning of the week? And I picked 168 for a particular reason. There's 168 hours in the week. If God gives us 168 hours in a week, can we give up one at the end of the week or the beginning of the week?
Right. Yeah, that's true. That is totally true. That is
Not a
totally
bad
true.
trade-off.
No.
Yeah. Well, this has been Rob. You got any more?
No, this has been great because I mean, I'll go to church every week, and I always wonder, it's like, what does it take to do what that guy's doing? And how much time? And if you do a homily one time that I'm there, and a deacon does the homily, is he doing it every mass that day? Does he get kind of an obligation to do that?
No, I mean, like we all have, there's 5 deacons, so we split that up.
Right.
So most deacons will get one mass, a week. Sometimes if somebody's not there, somebody will fill in and do 2. So, normally when you're preaching, you're doing 1, maybe 2 masses that week. And it's probably interesting that we rotate. We rotate masses so that we're not at the same mass all the time, so that you do get a sense of the preaching of all the deacons.
Mm-hmm.
So we rotate it around.
I don't know, Anthony. Anthony, you're pretty good at this. I could see you doing a podcast inside a deacon's life.
Yeah, maybe someday. I'll add it to the list of things I'm doing.
Well, you're not a busy guy.
But it's all great.
Man.
I love it.
It's all great. Well, I think we did good. If 3 Italian guys from Jersey did an hour almost, what could the book got long? I think it was a good podcast.
I think if 3 guys from Jersey can keep it down to an hour, I think it's a good
exactly. Go on all day.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. But we want to thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Great.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
No problem. Well, this was Help Me, I'm Middle Aged. My name is Rob.
And I'm Rob too.
And we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.